What's been one of your favorite lessons that you've learned?
Favorite lessons? That's a loaded question. Alignment is everything.
When did you identify even the path of being a consultant?
Right. So consulting to me is the ability to help organizations, teams, departments navigate from point A to B in a very strategic manner. People analytics, how to comb through qualitative, quantitative data, how to understand project management. Strategy consulting is really 3 phases. The first phase is a visioning phase, stakeholder engagement, focus groups, interviews. But then the second phase is all about goal development. Third phase, implementation phase. So you're actually executing all of that.
What was that like actually getting into it?
And so I was managing anywhere from 10 to 12 different projects at a time, have some type of methodology or system to manage a project. Here comes back Georgia State. It was so much fun. Yeah. Felt like HBCU sometimes on Tuesday and Thursdays with the DJs out, the Greeks were out stepping. So I interned for 3 summers back to back through Inroads for a Fortune 500 company for 3 years.
What would you say was your biggest takeaway?
So I realized that I was honestly following somebody else's career path that I thought was for me, and it wasn't for me, and I had to kind of figure that out.
You have quite a lot of certifications. You are a certified executive coach, certified facilitator, associate diversity coach, certified culture champion.
Yeah.
And more and more and more.
I lost count. I found myself starting my own company, my own LLC. Got on board of Georgia Tech Strategic Consulting, and it was cool because it combined my love for consulting, but also my new love for higher ed.
Welcome to Connecting the Dots, the #1 podcast for professional development. My name is Adonis Thrax Hill, and I am your host. Today, we welcome a very special guest, a good friend of mine, someone who I look up to, and to read off an introduction. A strategic consulting leader with 15 years of proven success working with Fortune 500, government, healthcare, and nonprofit organizations. A certified executive coach, a culture champion, and strategic consulting director at Georgia Tech. None other than Byron Fitch.
Man, what an introduction. Thanks for allowing me to be here. Exciting, yes.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
I think I just want to highlight that we've had the opportunity to have, some pretty good conversations over these past few years.
Right.
You shared so much with me, and I thought it was only right we create an opportunity for others to experience that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of similarities in our background, but thank you for being here today.
Of course. I'm excited.
So I have the pleasure of knowing you on a level most people don't. I kind of want to walk through your journey and how it got started.
Sure.
Starting back with just kind of looking at your upbringing.
Okay.
Would you mind just kind of talking about your upbringing, your childhood, and how that kind of shaped the man we know today?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of the few, I guess, left natives of Atlanta, right? So most people I know are transplants here, but uniquely, I grew up here. Both sides of my family's from Atlanta. So I'm like true AT alien, born and bred. And
yes,
so
sir.
Not a Grady baby, but born at Piedmont Hospital instead. And grew up in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And so really come from a very humble, working, middle-class family. My mom worked in education. My dad was in kind of budget and finance. And so growing up in Atlanta, it was really cool because all of my family was here. Yeah. So growing up around my cousins, my dad is one of 7 brothers. So I had 15 first cousins around me all the time. Both sets of my grandparents were here in Atlanta until they passed away recently. And really just church was my crutch for me. So very active in my church, from being in the youth group at church to also one day actually leading our young adult ministry for several years. So just really that helped ground me in my faith and just really my why and my purpose in life. And so really positive childhood, really positive upbringing. And then another fun memory I think about too is my mom actually worked at the same elementary school that I attended for K through 6th grade. Yep. So while most people thought that was kind of lame, I was like, that was cool because I got all the attention, the favors, the good cafeteria food. It was just kind of growing up with my mom at actually work was really cool for me.
Everyone doesn't get those types of perks, man.
Yeah,
being in school and your mom's there.
Exactly. Yep.
I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool, so it was good for me. Yeah.
And I even want to ask you this. You said your mom was in education.
Yeah.
Do you think that's kind of impacted, your profession and kind of the space that you're in today?
That's a good question. I actually never thought about that until actually you just said it now, because when I was growing up, I never thought I would end up working in higher ed ever.
Right.
I thought higher ed was just for professors or administrators, but honestly, now that I'm in higher ed, I'm like, oh, maybe it did.
Yeah.
Maybe that connection was actually from the start.
Do you guys have conversation about that? Kind of like her professional higher ed type of experiences and yours?
We don't, because I mean, she worked in secondary school, which is a little bit different than higher ed, but we actually don't have those conversations.
Super interesting.
That's a good point you brought up, though.
And I mean, we've had conversations. I don't think I've actually kind of thought about that either.
Yeah.
We'll circle back.
Okay.
Maybe have a conversation with her.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah. But super awesome. So your mom, was at the school that you were going to. What was high school like?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity, growing up in Atlanta in DeKalb County school system, so I actually had the chance to go to a different set of middle school and high schools. It was not near my neighborhood because it was called majority and minority. So it was basically helping kids who excelled to go to better schools, not maybe your zone. So I actually went to 2 different middle school and high schools outside of my neighborhood.
Okay.
Which to me, my parents wanted me to do that because my brother before me went to the area neighborhood school and they were like, nope, you're not doing that.
Yeah.
So we need you to go to a better school system. And so that really gave me more access to better teachers, better leadership activities, and just better curriculum. So I'm glad I actually did that because I feel like that helped me to really be more prepared for going to Georgia State eventually.
And I was just about to say, I was going to ask you if that maybe kind of shaped your decision of Georgia State.
Yes.
Because I wanted to ask, why Georgia State?
Yeah, so Georgia State, man, it was funny. So growing up in Atlanta, I didn't want to leave Atlanta going to college. Like a lot of people said, I want to get out of my parents' home. I want to escape. I want to go all across the country. I wanted to stay here because all of my family, my friends, my church was here in Atlanta. So I was like, okay, looking around at Georgia State, I got into Morehouse, got into Georgia State, got into a few other colleges, but financially it made sense to go to Georgia State because it was free. Being under the Hope Scholarship, which I know is a little bit different now, but still going to school for free, being around my community, my people. Atlanta is such a vibrant cultural melting pot. I just wanted to stay in the city. And honestly, visiting Georgia State, I had been to Georgia State plenty of times because my dad worked downtown right next door to Georgia State. So I knew the atmosphere, I knew the industry. It felt like home to me. It felt really just comfortable. It felt familiar. I saw people that looked like me everywhere I went, from professors to advisors. Everything was just so, diverse for me. So that's where I wanted to go.
So hope nobody gets offended, but between Morehouse and Georgia State, also as a Georgia State alum myself.
Yes, and I have plenty of family members who graduated from Morehouse, so I have deep in my heart. I love Morehouse, fam and Spelman fam. My wife is Spelman.
Love them all.
Yes,
absolutely.
Of course. Yeah, give a shout out to them. Yep.
So you were pretty much already in some way familiar with at least the atmosphere of Georgia State.
Right.
What was your experience like, once you got in and as you were going through your collegiate journey?
It was amazing. It was challenging and amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
Challenging because I was in, Robinson College of Business, which is no joke. I was a finance major. Yep. So when I got my first dose of taking them accounting courses, I was like, what in the world did I get myself into? I was like, why me, Lord? Why? But it was challenging. The curriculum was really advanced, challenging. Professors were no nonsense. But I actually, during the time, got a chance to be part of their freshman learning communities and also then their sophomore learning community, which was the BLC at the time. I don't know what it's called now. Yeah. So for the first 2 years of my college career, I actually got a chance to kind of take the same classes with the same folks in a cohort for 2 years.
There you go.
So from there, I established really lifelong friendships. People I'm cool with to this day. And we actually navigated together. We failed together. We had success together. But, it was just really cool. And so by the time I got to my junior year classes, I was more prepared to kind of face some of those junior level, senior level classes. But I love the cohort mentality. I love the community aspect. I was heavily involved in a lot of different organizations on campus. Had some wonderful professors, good advisors. It was amazing. It was so much fun. Hanging out. I remember Tuesday and Thursdays, just felt like HBCU sometimes on Tuesday and Thursdays with the DJs out. The Greeks were out stepping. So it was like, is this HBCU or is this Georgia State?
Absolutely.
But it was the culture was just popping back then. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Georgia State special.
Yeah.
At least I remember those same things: Tuesdays, Thursdays, and freshman learning community myself.
Exactly.
And I think it's really cool to be able to kind of see what your journey was and the similarities that I had as well.
Yep.
And I kind of want to know, just what would you say was your biggest takeaway?
Biggest takeaway
from being at Georgia State.
Yeah.
Before transitioning to post grad life, as you look back.
Yes.
What do you think might have been your biggest takeaway or biggest learning?
Mine is unique, is the fact that I didn't want to do finance after college. So I spent the whole 4 years in finance, and I'm like, oh, that's not for me. That was my biggest takeaway. And even though I discovered that in my senior year, I was like, well, better change, now than never. And so I realized that I was honestly following somebody else's career path that I thought was for me, and it wasn't for me. And I had to kind of figure that out because during that time at Georgia State, I was a part of Inroads, which is a phenomenal career development program for minorities, and it helps you find internship opportunities. But also, you're in this whole leadership cohort in the summer. So I interned for 3 summers back to back through Inroads for a Fortune 500 company for 3 years. And I got a good dose of, finance, auditing, accounting. And after 3 years, I was just like, this ain't for me. I'm bored. I don't like what I'm doing. I want to be really amongst people. I want to do something that's people oriented. So, yeah, the biggest lesson was just finding out it wasn't for me. Finance wasn't for me.
And I think it's great that you had the opportunity, had the experience to try something.
Yep.
And, you said you did 3 summers in a row.
Yeah.
So
I didn't have a break in the summer. I was school nonstop, fall and spring, and then summer I was working full time, May to August for 3 summers.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So through that, you discovered that, hey, that's not necessarily for me.
Right.
So what was it like? What sounds like transitioning?
Yeah.
Into post-grad life.
Yes.
Graduating, understanding that, okay, well, I've spent kind of this time doing. That's not quite it. What was the transition like post-grad?
It was tough. It was challenging because imagine just having like your resume screens finance, and just all these things. And so I think my senior year, I graduated like December of that year. Okay. So I was kind of a fall graduate. So that whole fall through maybe early like spring, I just worked on like transitioning my whole like branding. Okay. So I was like, okay, I had 3 summers of interning at a Fortune 500 company, which is amazing.
Awesome.
I have, 4 years of Georgia State career stuff, leadership experiences I've done on campus, a lot of community building. So I just leveraged all of that and changed and spend it into like, consulting is the field for me because consulting is all about really being a people strategist, using critical thinking, being an advisor, and just kind of like you can still use skills you learned as a finance major, critical thinking skills, analytical skills, into like people skills. So I just totally changed my whole resume, LinkedIn stuff, and I just started, putting myself out there, and I got picked up eventually, by a company.
And when did you identify even the path of being a consultant?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I kind of learned more about it when I was like kind of on the payment recruiting during like the fall recruiting season at Georgia State. Okay. I think maybe a few companies that come to some of the career fairs and kind of talked about, careers in consulting. I was like, consulting sounds, interesting, sounds broad, but let me kind of explore that a little bit more. But then when I was like, okay, consulting is cool, but I want to be in something that's more people focused because there's a lot of types of consulting. You can, do IT consulting or manufacturing or, finance or whatever. But I wanted to do something more with like people and strategy. So I kind of was trying to look for a company that kind of gave me an opportunity to kind of work with people more versus just numbers and crunching and kind of just being bored by just the data.
So it sounds like you doing my quick recap here.
Yeah.
You went to Georgia State. It was already familiar.
Yep.
You had some awesome experiences during that. You actually got involved with Inroads, which gave you an opportunity to basically intern for a Fortune 500 company 3 summers in a row.
Yep.
And as you were transitioning out of Georgia State, you majored in finance, but realized, hey, that's not where I want to be.
Right.
But through some of those experiences while at Georgia State, you kind of got introduced to consulting.
Exactly.
So as you graduated in December and kind of saying, all right, well, I know I don't want to do this.
Right.
What's another path forward? You had something to reference.
Exactly. Yes.
That sound about right?
Yeah, and I tell people, like, it's important when you're in college nowadays. The job market is so much more competitive now, and, like, there are not so many jobs available because of the economy. And so I always tell, like, people coming up in college, like, have an internship on your resume. Like, don't just have a degree. Have a degree plus internships from real companies with real experiences because even though, like, I'm only interning, like, in the summer for, like, May to August is, like, 12 weeks? Yeah. But it still counts as, like, a year. Like, oh, you interned for, this company for 3 years? Wow, that's impressive. You just didn't go to school and just, go home or just hang out and just, go to party all the time at school. I actually did, stuff on campus, but also in the summer, I was very productive. Absolutely. So that's a great, takeaway I tell people nowadays, like, have internship experiences.
I totally agree. And obviously, Inroads is a program.
Yes.
So think there's some resources that people got to look into.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I want you to, if you don't mind, kind of helping our audience understand what is consulting, what is being a strategic consultant.
Sure. Yeah, so consulting in general is a very broad field, right? So
Right.
consulting to me is the ability to help organizations, teams, departments navigate from point A to B in a very strategic manner. But when you combine strategy consulting, that gets to more of like, what do we envision for the future? So for instance, I tell people strategy consulting is really 3 phases. The first phase is a visioning phase.
Yep.
So what are your biggest hopes and dreams for the future? Where do you see yourself, in 5 years from now? Like, what is it going to take to really get to that, X spot, right? So that's kind of the visioning. You're trying to really map out, like brainstorm, really how do I get there, right?
The A to B.
Right, the visioning phase. So that involves like a lot of, stakeholder engagement, focus groups, interviews, interviewing your community that you're working with to figure out what do they want to see happen. And you as a consultant, you're trying to speak on behalf of that community to a client or to an industry internal, whether you're in internal consulting or external consulting. It's all about helping to translate the community feedback and insights into a viable solution for your community.
Yep.
But then the second phase is all about goal development, right? So once you have the vision, you've done all of your canvassing across your community, what's going to be the new mission, statement of the organization, the new vision, the new mission. What are the goals? What are the values of that organization as far as what are those beliefs that you want people to actually serve as a North Star? So they know no matter what we're doing in our organization, we're turning back to those values to guide us forward, right?
Yep.
So once you get all that done, then you're what I call third phase, implementation phase. So you're actually executing all of that. You're creating kind of a portfolio structure to make sure that these programs, these goals, objectives have resources, they have people, they have momentum, they have the backing of executive sponsors to get it done. So that's kind of what I would say, like those 3 phases as far as like strategy consulting entail.
Yeah, I think you summarized it as that was such a great, concise way to explain that.
Sure.
I think a lot of people who are consultants, I hope they will applaud at how easily you just did that.
And that took years of experience and practice, obviously. I didn't come out the gate, knowing that stuff, but just knowing like how to simplify, how to explain it to anybody. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, doesn't matter what field you're in. It's all the same methodology, just different industries.
And as you said, you're able to explain it that way after, so many years of experience.
Right.
But what was the guy who was a finance major looking to, transition into consulting?
Yeah.
What was that like actually getting into it and those early days? Where did it start?
Yeah, it was tough. So when I finished Georgia State, in the fall of that year, and then I kind of was like hitting the pavement between like January and April. That's when I was kind of hitting the pavement interviewing.
Gotcha.
And so between that time, I was just trying to figure out what company makes the most sense for me and all this kind of stuff. And so got picked up by my first consulting company. I actually moved to the Midwest, randomly for a year for that company.
I actually stepped away from Atlanta.
Yeah, I know, leaving my beloved, Wakanda land, Atlanta, right? It's kind of like I tell people, Atlanta is the promised land for black folks, pretty much. But
and we're in the Midwest.
yeah. Oh, I was in Omaha, Nebraska.
Omaha, Nebraska.
Yes, Omaha, Nebraska for a year. Culture shock,
Imagine
weather shock, all these shocks, right? And so, but it was good for me to kind of move away from Atlanta. I moved there specifically to be under the company to kind of learn their process. It was kind of a training program, and then I moved back to Atlanta in the Atlanta office like the year later.
Oh, wow.
Like really
That
quickly,
worked
like
out.
not even like 365. I was like 364. I was back in Atlanta in the office, but
The opportunity presented itself, and you were like,
yeah,
absolutely.
But working at that company really helped me to understand my main like foundational elements of consulting. So understanding like people analytics, how to comb through qualitative, quantitative data, how to understand project management, how to understand like how to train clients in using different programs and software and platforms, and really having a critical thinking ability. And that's the main thing I tell people about consulting. It really requires you to think beyond your silo. So it's all about understanding the landscape of companies, of clients, of people, and figuring out what makes them tick, what are their hot buttons, because you can't just go in there with just, premeditated like solutions. You have to understand the landscape first before you can kind of go in for the kill, as you might want to say. But it really gave me those financial elements. And I stayed with that company for about 4 years before transitioning on to the next company. But that company gave me like most of my foundational elements, especially when it relates to people-focused strategies.
And I was going to say, it definitely sounds like at least your approach to consulting is people.
Oh, yeah.
It's people first.
People first.
Before
Anything else.
solution
Yep.
or
Yep.
this is what we need to do.
Exactly.
Let's take a step back and let's understand the people, the constituents,
Right.
the organization as it is.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. People first every time. People over processes. Yep.
So it sounds like that was kind of what your main, you got that foundation from that first company.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
how does the journey go next? You
Yeah.
know, you found somewhere.
Yeah.
You spent 4 years there.
Yep.
You went to the Midwest in Nebraska for a
Yep.
second, but you got back, came back
Quickly
home.
with the quickness.
Came back home.
Yep.
Sounds like you got your footing. Mm-hmm. How did the journey go next?
Yeah, so I landed to another company, and really that company gave me the ability to kind of serve more as like a project manager of consulting processes. And so that's where I really honed in on like how do you manage consulting projects, especially in that company. I actually was working with people who were overseas, and so understanding how to navigate different cultures or different time zones and different timelines. So at one point,
language barriers,
of course. And so I was managing like anywhere from like 10 to 12 different projects at a time. And I was like, man, what did I get myself into? This is a lot. Like, how do you like really like serve as a, you know, really acute portfolio manager of so many different projects and processes and stuff? And so that definitely stressed me to no end, because when my prior company working on like, you know, project teams at a time, you know, 6 month stint, we'll move on to the next one a year. But this is like, oh, no, you're managing multiple streams of, you know, multi-year projects and all that kind of stuff. And so that really helped me to develop those kind of skills.
And I even want to, if we could dive in deeper there.
Sure.
It sounds like, you know, the first company you were at, you're on the project team. So you weren't necessarily in the position of having to manage the project or multiple projects.
Nope. I was one of, you know, 10 people on a project team.
And you had a specific area to own.
In a role. Yep. Yep.
But as you transition into this new role, this next role, you were in that position of actually managing not only a project, but multiple projects.
And multiple streams. Yeah. So that was unique, but it's taught me a lot about just having to multitask different things at the same time, helping to kind of like lead different teams who have different, you know, motives, different abilities, like you said, different language barriers, that kind of stuff. So that was a great experience up until, you know, ding dong, I got laid off of that job, actually. Yeah. And so that was like my turning point of like my consulting career, because I spent about maybe almost 8 years between those two companies. Got laid off in a very interesting manner. Yeah. And so I had to realize, okay, this maybe it's not my path for me, you know? And that's when I had to be like, you know, God is maybe trying to tell me something as far as like, you know, at that time, you know, I was young, I was ambitious, you know, I was chasing the money, chasing the status, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I feel like God had to kind of like level set me and be like, you know what, Byron, you should be chasing more purpose and culture than the money and all this stuff, because that's not where I need you to be. Yeah. So that changed my whole entire like mindset about my next like chapter in my career.
I've got two things I kind of want to actually dive into there. One, as you talked about the shift into having to manage multiple projects. A large volume. Looking back, what would you say really helped you be able to do that or step into that type of role? Is there a particular skill? Is there anything particular that kind of stands out to say, like, stepping into a role like that, this would help you excel or be effective? Sure.
So I would say, like, during that time, I think for me it was just helpful to like have some type of methodology or system to manage a project. So I'm not even PMP certified, but I know a lot of the different methodologies as far as agile or waterfall and that kind of stuff. So picking one of those methodologies as a project manager and sticking to that kind of helped me. You know, I learned that through other people around me, of course. Gotcha. And so that kind of helped me to figure out, okay,
colleagues,
and mentors in those companies and stuff. But just really sticking to a methodology, applying that, but also realizing like each project or stream is different. So understanding the stakeholders that you're trying to really lead and manage, realizing a lot of times as project managers, like you're not really maybe managing them from a performance standpoint. You're managing their work. They report to somebody else, but you're seen as a project manager. So realizing I can't really, you know, try to tell them like, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to do whatever. But it was more about like using my influence and my project management for the greater good of the project team. So just understanding like who I'm working with, understanding their ins and outs helped me to really formulate a strategy to manage those people who are in those streams. And so it's kind of like a conveyor belt. Like, so you're doing the data, you're doing the quality assurance, you're doing the training. So each piece of the puzzle has different attitudes. They have different behavioral tendencies. So learning what makes things work for all of them and doing that times 8 or 9 times in different time frames. So that was some of the things that helped me the most.
And I would say one of my biggest things I look back on in my journey is really exactly what you said.
Yeah.
I wish that I was more intentional with developing my own methodology, my process.
Yep.
This is how I do my work from a more systematic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, different projects, different stakeholders call for flexibility
Exactly.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I wish I had really started to kind of build that out earlier in my career.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to highlight and thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah.
And you mentioned something that I kind of bypassed just to get to know Byron a little bit
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Your Clifton strengths.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I think it'd be cool to highlight that so the audience kind of knows you a little bit better.
Yeah. So my top 5 currently, as the last couple of years: maximizer, significance, communication, relator, and responsibility.
Which one of those do you think have probably played the greatest role
Yes.
in your professional journey?
Definitely relator all the way, because
That's
being
why
a
it's
people-focused strategist that I am, it's always been about building those unique, authentic relationships where trust is always at the core from the jump. I can't really build it with you if you can't trust me. So you've had to spend time with me in some kind of meaningful way. I've had to really be in your life for some kind of way, as your confidant, as your friend, as your colleague, whatever it is, but building that trust. So I pride myself in really building sustainable relationships wherever I go. And that started with me when in consulting, because I still have, friends from that first company to this day. Each company that I've left with, communities of friends and colleagues, because you never want to burn bridges, right? I've learned that, sometimes the hard way. But Relator definitely, has carried me, because I love people. It's my passion for really being a humble, people-focused servant, for the community.
I would say that's definitely showed up 100% between you and I even be able to build our relationship.
Yeah.
Super cool there.
Yep.
And Clifton Strengths is definitely a really cool tool.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if it's something you haven't done.
Yes, highly recommend it.
Highly recommend.
Yes.
Might help you learn a little bit about yourself.
Exactly. Yep.
So getting back to the journey.
Sure. Yeah.
So we went to that second company. You got laid off, which happens on the journey.
It does. It does.
Sounds like it gave you the opportunity to take a step back.
Who did it?
Kind of maybe reassess. You had about 8 years post-grad.
Yep.
What happened next?
Yeah, so I found myself starting my own company, my own LLC, out of nowhere, because during that layoff, I started kind of providing some consulting work to one of my mentors and big brothers who was starting his own company. And really, he started paying me. He was like, I need to pay you. I'm like, oh, you need to pay me? I was like, oh, I need to get my own LLC to be more official. So I started my LLC like that next year. Even before I got my next job, I started working for him and running his company from an operational strategy standpoint, applying the methodologies of what I had learned 8 years prior. And so that helped me realize, I can do this, by myself. But I was newly married too. So my wife was like, well, we still need a day job now. While I was doing my LLC stuff, I was looking for my next career move. And so I came across some folks in higher ed in Atlanta area. And so through Emerald's connection, got on board with Emory, was my first higher ed, organization.
Yep.
And so Emory was a great start. I got a chance to kind of work, in their Gazweta MBA Career Management Center, kind of doing strategy, people-focused work.
Yep.
And figured out, that was a good, stint, but that wasn't for me. And I was really missing more of the true consulting. And so through some networking, I found out that Georgia Tech actually had their own internal consulting department, which was higher ed has consulting. And so got on board of Georgia Tech strategic consulting, and it was cool because it combined my love for consulting, but also my new love for higher ed. And really being in a people-focused, mission-driven, organization. Because again, like I told you, I was chasing the money and the status and all of that when I was in corporate, and I was unhappy. Honestly, the last few years I was very unhappy, and I was just like, something's not right. And so again, like I said, guy had to sunset me from my job, which was ugly, but I made it, and I started my company, got in higher ed, and so that higher ed journey was really my own awakening to a new whole part of myself. Just realizing I can work in institutions to really do things behind the scenes that contribute to the success of our students.
Yes.
That was wow, who would have thought that was actually a reality? And honestly, people don't really think about higher ed as a profession. Thinking about your time, as a student, you see your professors, you see the administrators around, you're like, oh, that's them. Exactly. I want to be out here in corporate making this money, or getting this status. But it's just higher ed actually has very lucrative career paths. And I discovered that just through networking.
There's a lot I want to unpack.
Okay. Yeah.
One being that after you got laid off,
Yep.
you started your own LLC.
Yep.
Through connections, you had an opportunity to use your learnings.
Yep.
to make money.
Yep.
And
pay the bills.
Newly
married,
pay the bills.
Yep.
I think that's a testament to the two opportunities, the two places you were at. Grew your confidence. You had your methodologies. You knew how to now do the work.
Sure.
You did that, but you also were interested in something else.
Right.
You were able to step into this path. And did I hear you correctly? You said there was an Inroads connection.
Yes, yeah. So my Inroads connections, when you finish Inroads, you become an alum and ambassador. So even like when I finished Inroads, I was still very active. At one point, I served as the chair of the whole Atlanta alumni chapter, for 3 years. So still having Inroads. And so Inroads has some of the most amazing alumni superstars. So you think about like Inroads is kind of like another like business fraternity sorority. So when you're in Inroads, we already know what time it is. When I see another Inroads alum, I already know their story. I already know what they've been through. So it's like we're here. So like Inroads has thousands of alumni across the country. And so like one of my Inroads mentors put me on to like higher ed connections.
And I think that's super interesting, speaking of higher ed, because you got involved with Inroads while you're at Georgia State.
Exactly.
So that is a full circle.
Yeah.
Especially, considering, newly married.
Yep.
Say, hey, we need to get this day job.
Yep.
So that was a full circle.
Yep.
And that led you to Georgia Tech, which is where you're at now.
Yeah. Where I'm at now, yeah.
So going into Georgia Tech, I think it's even cool to kind of highlight, as you said, Georgia Tech has an internal consulting department, which basically services the full institution.
Correct.
Can you speak about just being in that role and kind of the things you've been responsible for and a part of?
Yeah, so our department is really unique because we are really seen as kind of internal thought leaders, advisors, and strategists to Georgia Tech. And so we report to the president's office. And really our main job and goal is to really help carry out the strategic plan of Georgia Tech. So when our current president, President Cabrera, got here back in 2019, he asked our department to actually create his 10-year strategic plan. And so we went through a whole year-and-a-half process, and we went through the same, visioning, goal, implementation phase to get to like a really viable aspirational plan. And so our job is to help carry out that plan across campus, and working with leaders, deans, VPs across campus. Department heads to really carry out their plans to make sure it aligns with that institute level plan. So my job is really fun and really exciting, and like never the same every day, because when I'm on campus, I'm hybrid, but I'm mostly on campus sometimes. I'm just out and about in the community, having meetings, connecting with leaders, brainstorming with them about, how do we make sure we operationalize these goals that you have? How do we make sure our values are speaking through our goals and everything that we say and we do? How do we build community? How do we really advocate for those who are underserved, underprivileged in our community? And so it's just really a great way to really be a community servant. And I'll tell you a funny story, people started calling me, and this is not my own name that I came myself, but people started calling me the mayor of Georgia Tech like 2 years ago. And I was just like, where did that come from? But people were like, well,
right there.
You the man, Byron, because every time we see you, you're always out here trying to advocate for our needs, advocating, on behalf of the leadership to, the top, big wigs of Georgia Tech. Yeah. And so I've taken that. At first I was like, I'm not the mayor. But I was like, okay, I see the compliment in that, right? Because people see me as that community vessel for campus. And so I've had a chance to be a part of being over staff council. So I don't know if you're familiar with staff council, but every university has like a student-focused council, but we have a staff council body. So I was actually chair and president of staff council during COVID, And so trying to help, engage our staff during one of the most challenging times of our time, and really helping to create, some of the first ever Staff Appreciation Day events and, community events for staff, showing them love, appreciation, engagement. That was really fun to do as well. So my role is not just about consulting, but it's also about community building. And, my department and my leadership team, they allow me to really soar across campus and really do what I need to do to really make sure that the strategies that we put forth are valuable, they are feasible, but they are impactful for all students, faculty, and staff.
I think, one, that's phenomenal. I just kind of want to highlight from what you just shared, a huge part is making sure that the stakeholders, the people who are making decisions, that you're helping them do that, with it tying back to the overall strategic plan, those values, the path that we set forth, because these different department heads and these different verticals, they're all running their own ship, if you would.
Yes, they are.
So I think it's important to highlight a huge part of what you do is make sure that, hey, that ship, the direction is going is aligning
Yes.
across the whole institution.
Yes.
That sound about right?
Alignment is everything, yes. Because if you're not aligned, you're not really adding to the bigger picture, which is the overall institute plan. Yes, you can be doing your own thing as a dean in this department or whatever, but it needs to be aligning because we're on this mission together. We're not trying to be in silos. And, a lot of times, not just in higher ed, but large corporations. I think about Georgia Tech as a large corporation because we have literally 7 different colleges. Each college has their own, entities, their own aspirations, but we have to really make sure they're all aligned. To really achieve things like student success and expanding access and research enrollment and innovation, some of our top level strategies. And so all those parts play together in the bigger picture.
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm sure between all the roles you've had in Georgia Tech, you talked about touching so many different projects.
Yes.
Curious to know what's been one of your favorite projects that you've done over your career.
I would have to say the project that is all about our culture. So one thing that I got a chance to do when I joined my department is really create our own organizational culture practice area. And it was all about how do we really make sure that the values that we say that we are doing are just not just lip service, right? So if we say, we thrive on collaboration, we thrive on diversity, we thrive on innovation and excellence, what does that mean? Like when I say it versus do you see me out here in the streets doing it? So after a little bit after COVID, we ran across an opportunity to really do some community building where we actually engaged our entire campus, staff, faculty, students, alumni, in helping us to really help us understand what do these values mean to you? What resonates with you the most? And so from that community insight and that feedback, created a whole values-based platform called Living Our Values Every Day. So LOVE stands for Living Our Values Every Day, LOVE. And that was the platform they created to really campaign across campus as far as we love GT. Because we are living our values every day. And so we kind of created that, in-house. And from that, we've done, a lot of different culture surveys for the entire institute. We've done a lot of great action planning efforts with the survey data because one thing you probably learned working to hire yourself, when you do surveys and you do different things that collect data and insights, what do you do with that?
What do you do with it?
Sometimes it collects dust year after year.
What do you do?
We were the first group that kind of make sure that our insights were actually activated on, right? So we did, focus groups and action planning sessions and things to really dig deeper beyond the survey results and really create programs to enhance, culture, to enhance our talent management strategies, to enhance our leadership practices at the very top.
Absolutely.
To help, middle managers, have more opportunities to excel and thrive, in the way they lead. So these strategies came from that cultural framework that we created, years ago. And so that I would say that's been one of my biggest, most visible, impactful projects.
Congrats on doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that really shows that people aspect that you knew you really you had to get back to.
Right.
So thank you for your work there.
Of course, yeah.
For all students in professional development.
Yeah.
I even wanted to kind of move into professional development.
Yeah.
You have quite a lot of certifications.
Yeah. I lost count.
Would you like to share the importance of professional development? And even some of the certifications you have and how it's helped you.
Yeah, so professional development is top-notch key for anybody, no matter if you're in higher ed or if you're back in corporate, because organizations that invest dollars in professional development really mean serious business about making sure you're excelling and succeeding. Because think about me, I'm in higher ed, right? Sometimes higher ed can be siloed against industry, but because we have departments and teams that really invest in us, going to conferences, that are more industry focused helps me bring back industry, best practices and knowledge to my team about what are some of the biggest trends and new trends in strategy planning, or what are some trends in change management or in culture building. So having ability to go to conferences, getting certifications, in change management, executive coaching, facilitation, DISC, inclusive leadership. I can name so many more, but those things have really helped me to become a better, more effective leader, a people leader, a strategist, somebody who has more, who is more keen about emotional, social intelligence. Those kind of things have helped me a lot along the way. Sometimes it's not about going back to school, because some people be like, oh, I need to go back to school to get professional development. But in this case, right now, I haven't gone back to school yet. It's definitely on my radar, maybe in the future, but I've just kind of been more interested in getting more hands-on training certifications and more, experiences that kind of allow me to apply those things more directly. And so those have helped me tremendously to be more well-rounded, in higher ed, because it kind of keeps me fresh about what's happening in industry. Absolutely. Versus just being like, oh, I'm all higher ed only, but I need to be more about just beyond higher ed as well.
And just so the audience kind of maybe has a better snapshot.
Sure.
You are in certified executive coach,
Yes.
certified facilitator,
Yes.
associate diversity coach, certified culture champion,
Yeah.
and more and more and more.
Sure. Yeah.
I like to just kind of highlight that because you and I have even had conversations,
Yeah.
which has kind of inspired me on my own journey.
Sure.
That certified executive coach and facilitator,
Sure.
is that something that you would recommend for anybody interested in consulting
Sure.
or work with people? Is that something you would definitely recommend?
I would, if you really love people, because there are a lot of consultants who tolerate people in their job because they have to, let's say you're on a project, like, oh, I got to actually interview all these people. I don't want to do that because I rather just keep to myself. But me, you have to really love people. Because the part about being an executive coach or leadership coach is that you have to actually have uncomfortable conversations with that leader, right? So if I'm trying to help this leader develop, new skill sets on, emotional intelligence, I'm having that leader to dig back to their past trauma and like pull out some of those things that maybe have held you back as far as like you went through this back in the day. How has that maybe held you back from really getting to this next point? So it involves you going to, the emotional core of somebody sometimes, which is not for everybody. And that's something that I actually love doing because for me, I pride myself being very emotionally intelligent and in tune with people's, feelings. I'm kind of more of an empath, and so I love kind of really feeling people's energies and their feelings out, and so that helps me be more effective in helping them really navigate their own personal story and their own testimonies into success, and really tapping that out of them. Some people in life are really grounded just in their past trauma and their past failures, and my job as a coach is to help you break free from those chains. So I say it's not for everybody. It's for those who truly love the art of people at all levels.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like leaning into people is something that's help you excel at what you do.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's something I wanted to ask. It sounds like it's a safe bet to say, hey, you'll probably be able to do your best work.
Yeah.
By leaning into people.
Exactly. Yep.
Super cool.
Yep.
We could spend days here.
We could.
But what I would like to kind of move into is volunteerism.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's something that's been a huge part of your journey.
Yes.
Could you speak a bit about the volunteer work that you do?
Yeah.
And why you do it?
Yeah. So started, again, I mentioned this earlier about my Inroads journey. So when I finished, Georgia State, became an Inroads alum, an ambassador, kind of, part of that, amazing group of alumni across the country. And, when I was, still in Atlanta, Coach, when I moved back, from the Midwest, I immediately, joined our Inroads Atlanta alumni chapter. And so, long story short, became the chair of that organization for 3 different years. And so my goal was to really help to build a better, clearer platform for Inroads alumni in the Atlanta area because there were so many alumni that were untapped. And so I wanted to really help bring more, appreciation to the alumni in the Atlanta area. Let's do things. Let's get back to those Inroads students in college as mentors, as facilitators in the conferences or the workshops. So that was kind of my first stint to community service. Cool. Did that for several years. And then, here comes back Georgia State, my alma mater, right? Yeah. So got a chance in 2019 to be a part of the Young Alumni Council. Yep. And so at that point, I had been a little bit disconnected from Georgia State. I mean, I would go to different events, every now and again, third Thursdays or, come back to talk to different classes. But I wanted to get more like in the thick of like young adult Georgia State. Like, what does it look like to be like 40 and under Georgia State? Let's build a movement. So we had an amazing group of us. And, you were a part of it as well. So you already know what time we had. But those 3 years being involved in YAC was just so phenomenal because I got back connected to Georgia State. Got a chance to kind of see, Georgia State, how it is. Because, when I graduated, it was a little bit different from now. Yeah. Still similar tendencies, but just a whole different, culture now. So I felt more connected to, the students, the alumni chapter. And so we did some extraordinary things. Yep. We did some really great workshops, webinars, events, and just really bringing more awareness to the young adults at Georgia State because that was, to me, an untapped demographic. And you know this. I know. Yeah. So many people, between 22 and 40, what are we doing with those alumni? We're focusing sometimes on those who are more older alumni because we want their big dollars. Yep. But that age bracket was like an untapped market. And so I loved being a part of that. And so even finishing that, back in 2022, still being involved. And then, having the honor to, be named a 40 under 40 back in 2023 was just an extreme honor for me. And so I just love giving back to Georgia State. Right now I try to lead, the YAC Cares or the GSU Cares events every year. Yeah. I just did an event, I'm a student alumni meet and greet. So they brought back some of us 40 under 40 alum to kind of talk to the students. Yep. But yeah, anytime somebody calls me about, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, yes, sign me up. Where can I be there? Because I know Georgia State gave me the platform to be where I am today. So that's been a huge part of my background. But also in higher ed, though, I've been volunteering at a lot of different organizations. So one thing right now I've been doing, I'm on the board of an organization called NCCI, which is a network for continuous change and innovation. And so this is a higher ed nonprofit board that brings together people like myself across higher ed who do strategy, innovative work. And so
cool.
Being one of the only black male board members, one of the youngest on the board, has been really an exceptional, challenge and, ability to do that, to get back to tell people like, look, you can see yourself in me. I didn't have the typical, higher ed background. I came from corporate, crashed and burned along the way. But look at me, I'm at the table right now. So that's really been important, again, to really open doors and pave the way. And then, of course, in my neighborhood right now, we live in Mosey Park, one of the best neighborhoods in Atlanta, in my opinion. And so I'm on, our neighborhood association board, and so we help to try to build community within that neighborhood. We're all about revitalizing our neighborhoods in Atlanta, from where they used to be to where they are now. So really being involved with that as well. And then lastly, church is a huge crutch for me. So right now, my wife and I are extremely involved in different, church ministries as far as marriage ministry. We just finished a phenomenal Black History program, for the whole month of February. We've been involved in some of our youth activities. So I've always been involved in church ministry, from young adults to communications to engagement, and then serving as a strategist to church leadership, helping them figure out ways to do things better. So yeah, community is important to me. I'm always involved in some kind of capacity.
I tip my hat to you, brother. I think, you model the way in a lot of ways. I think volunteering is very, very, very important.
Yes.
I think you've kind of shared there's so many different ways that somebody can do it.
Yep.
So thank you for all the work that you do and all the communities that you're a part of.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah.
And Big Brother, Big Sister is also a part of your journey, too, if I'm not mistaken.
It was, yeah. So I forgot about that. When I was in college, I did that all throughout my college career.
Yeah.
The Big Brothers and Sisters for Metro Atlanta. So that was great. Just kind of like being like a responsible mentor to like at that time he was like 6, 7. And even like I followed him throughout his whole high school, journey, college career. So that was really cool, too. Yeah. Uh-huh.
A lot of things you've done.
Yes.
Oh, man, I wish we had more time.
Yes.
So many things we could continue to talk about.
Right.
There are a few things I want to touch on before we finish up here.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite questions.
Okay.
You've done all these incredible things.
Okay.
What would you say might be the top 3 skills that, really helped you or were instrumental on your journey?
Yeah, wow, that's a tough one. There's so many skills, but if I would say right now, one would be having emotional and social intelligence. I think I talked about that before, but just really being in tune with people's feelings, caring, what's important to them, understanding, their journey, their story, and not just ignoring that, not just really just putting that to the side, because that's not fair to them and it's not fair to you as well. Yeah. So that's one thing. Also, just you're really being strategic focused. Having that strategic ability to really think about any kind of problem, any kind of scenario, and just like having a methodology and navigating that from left to right has carried me so far, because strategy is like bread and butter. And to me, it comes naturally. Everywhere I go, I can't help think about like, what's the strategy? What can we do? And the people are like, okay, turn it off, Byron. Sometimes turn it off. I'm like, okay, sure. But I can't help it. This is part of my being, because I'm like, let's do things better. Let's be more effective, more efficient.
Absolutely.
Let's operationalize our processes. But that has carried me really, really far. And I would say lastly, but not least, just really being organized, like having project management, in your tool belt. Whether you go back, like I know you just got your PMP recently, which is great, congratulations. But even if you don't have a PMP, like find a project management methodology to follow and stick to that, because that will help you be organized. That will help you create systems of excellence and knowledge bases that will help you go far.
Absolutely. I relate to everything you just said.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
I've got another one for you.
Okay.
What's been one of your favorite lessons that you've learned?
Favorite lessons? That's a loaded question. Just one favorite lesson.
One that pops out.
I would say for me, one of the things I would say in my journey when I made that shift from like corporate to higher ed, and I was trying to figure out what do I want to do, I would say like, don't chase the money, chase the culture and impact. Because chasing money will give you temporary gratitude, temporary contentment and passion and all that, but it won't last you forever. So when you choose to chase culture and impact, that will sustain you, that will get you back to your own innate values. And I believe people should always be grounded in their values. Yeah. It will help you figure out, okay, what I'm doing, no matter if I'm a consultant, whether I'm an engineer, whether I'm, a teacher, a professor, whatever you're doing, that will help you stay grounded in your impact-driven focus area. So, yeah, chasing culture impact over money.
Wow. I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
Man, this was great, Byron. Is there anything that you would like to leave or share that we didn't get to for the audience?
Yeah, I would say another thing I always try to tell people is like, know and understand your why, right? So when you think about your why, what makes your life important? Like, what are your values? What's your belief system? What are those like crutch, morals and beliefs that you want to like stand for? And as long as you are founded in those and stay grounded in those things, no matter where you go, whether you go to a new career, you get laid off, because we all go through those seasons of like volatility and just like ugliness, right? Sometimes, but your why will carry you wherever you go, and it will keep you grounded. You can go back to the why and be recharged and keep going. So, knowing and understanding your why is my main thing.
I want to go one layer deeper there.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have any advice or suggestions for people who might be wanting to do that, but maybe they're having a hard time figuring out their values or their why? Is there anything you might be able to share that might be helpful? For
me, some things that have been helpful for me is like, being open to some of those assessments, like the Clifton strengths. Gotcha. Getting to know what are your innate strengths and talent abilities is helpful. Even taking other, behavioral things, like Myers-Briggs, or even like, the DISC assessment. So that's one layer, but also like having, some great, mentors and sponsors around you that really see things in you, because that's one thing I don't think I mentioned in this whole talk. Like, I've had the most phenomenal big brothers, big sisters around me since high school, like that has stick with me in every angle. I have what I call my personal board of directors.
I was going to say, you introduced me to
that. Right? So you have, like, looking around you, you have mentors, sponsors, advocates that pour into you, that see blind spots, that can help, really help you get to point A to point B. And so that has helped me tremendously, because sometimes they've seen things in me that I haven't even noticed about myself. And they're like, okay, I see this in you, Byron. You need to work on that, nurture that. That's another layer that can help you understand your why and what you want to do and what your beliefs are. But then also, I'm a huge, believer, in God. I'm a Christian, and I'm really faith-based, and I walk by faith. And so turning to, a spiritual belief system, hopefully, you have God in your life. If you don't, you need to have some kind of spiritual background in your life that really provides, foundation for you to like go to be restored, to be poured back into, and also to, build community. So those three things have helped me tremendously.
Man, thank you for sharing all of this, Byron. This is awesome.
Of course, you're welcome.
Oh, man, wish we had more time.
Yes.
But congrats to all that you've done.
Thank you.
Congrats to all that you're doing. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Of course.
And we look forward to doing this again, man.
Yes,
as
for
we
sure.
reach a new checkpoint.
And congrats to you. Thanks for having this platform for us just to kind of share and give of ourselves and, like, hopefully, engage and encourage the next, generation.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, this is Connecting the Dots, brought to you by Level Up Development. Connecting the Dots is the #1 podcast for professional development. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.